Can you remember all the NBA fights that happened after the year 2000? No? Well, then you clicked on the right video, as we'll go over the most savage fights in NBA history that took place after the year 2000. If you've ever played a sport, you'd know that emotions run high in the middle of games, especially when those games are coming to an end and your team is losing. Sometimes trash talk ends up going too far, and other times people accidentally make contact with another player and spark an entire scuffle. Here are just a few of the most savage fights in the NBA, and let me tell you, there is a great one towards the end involving Howard and Garnet, so make sure you stick around for that one. This first fight happens to be one of the most notable of all time, the Malice at the Palace incident involving Ron Artest and Ben Wallace. It was back in November 2004 in the Eastern Conference Finals. Obviously, this was a very important game for both parties, and with just 45 seconds remaining in the contest, things started to get physical. Emotions were running high, with the Indiana Pacers clearly running away with the win. Artest hit Wallace with a hard foul, with the game already decided, and the two got up into each other's faces. Wallace quickly shoved Artest right back, and the two immediately started throwing punches as staff members and teammates attempted to sort out the mess. But eventually, the other players that were trying to break them up started throwing punches themselves, and before you knew it, all of the players on the court were swinging at one another. It started to slow down a little bit, but then a fan threw a bottle of some sort onto the floor, and both Artest and another teammate ran up into the stands and literally began assaulting the fan that threw it. This resulted in a massive fight between the players and the fans, and still goes down as one of the worst incidents in NBA history. Finally, during the aftermath of the worst fight of all time, the NBA cracked down on the players. 9 different guys were suspended for a total of 146 games. If it weren't for the Malice at the Palace, fights in the league might be more prominent. But the NBA was so embarrassed and shocked over this incident that they informed all referees and staff to stifle any fight that broke out, or else it would be a massive punishment. Which brings me to our next fight between the New York Knicks and the Denver Nuggets. The two teams got into an all-out brawl in the middle of the game. J.R. Smith was fouled pretty hard by Marty Collins, and he took offense to that foul. The two of them got into each other's faces and started yelling at one another before sending over a few shoves. At first, it seemed like just your normal NBA scuffle, until Nate Robinson flew into the pile and gave Smith a hard shove when he wasn't looking. Smith was already mad, so he took the opportunity to grab Robinson, and the two of them tumbled to the ground and into the first row of the stands. As is the case for many fights, you couldn't really see what was going on under that giant pile, but what the camera was able to see was Carmelo Anthony land a nice, clean punch to an opposing player before running away from the pile and out of harm's way. Officials and teammates and even other staff members were doing everything they could to try and restore order to the court, while the crowd was going wild over the fight. After things finally started to calm down, it raised the question of what was going to happen to Smith and Robinson. The refs got together and held a long discussion, reviewing everything that had just happened along with how the entire incident started, and their final decision was shocking. They stepped out onto the middle of the court and announced to the entire arena that all 10 players who were on the court playing at the time the fight first broke out were to be completely ejected from the ballgame. This might be one of the only times in NBA history that this has ever happened, and I still really can't believe it did. I mean, NBA teams only have about 12 active players every game, and if you suspend the starting 5, you're only left with about 5 to 7 bench players who normally don't get any minutes. I'm telling you, it must have sucked for the fans in the arena who got their tickets to watch guys like Carmelo, Robinson, even JR, but hey, at least they can say that they witnessed one of the craziest fights and punishments in NBA history. There's some positives in that. Next, we have a fight that involves Kobe Bryant. Back in 2002 at the Staples Center, he took a 3-point shot right in the face of Reggie Miller, with the Lakers already destroying the Pacers in that contest. It's kind of an unspoken rule among NBA players that you just don't take a shot like that with your team winning on the last possession of the ballgame. It's just disrespectful to a lot of players around the league, and for good reason. Kobe apparently didn't really care about that unspoken rule in this instance, and Miller took exception to the shot. They got right up against one another and began yelling and arguing until they each randomly started throwing each other around. The benches for both teams ended up clearing, and instead of just wrapping up the game, the refs had to review the footage and settle all this conflict down. By the end of it all, both Miller and Kobe were suspended for 2 games, with Bryant receiving a $12,500 fine for his punch on Reggie. Miller went on a talk show later on in his life and said that there's absolutely no bad blood between him and Kobe, unlike in this next fight involving Kevin Garnett. On January 12, 2015, the Brooklyn Nets were locked in a tight contest against the Houston Rockets. It all started when Garnett was called for a common foul over restraining Dwight Howard. Meanwhile, the two were just battling it out for inside positioning on a rebound. Garnett was already getting frustrated, so this was just kind of icing on the cake. He pushed Dwight and started yelling at the referee that he didn't do anything wrong. Howard shoved him back as a response, which caused Garnett to escalate the situation by throwing a basketball at his back. They both marched right up to one another, and Garnett ended up giving Dwight a swift headbutt to the face, with Howard slapping Garnett on the back of the neck in response. This was about the time when all the security guards and officials stormed in to separate them before it got even worse. To make matters completely worse, though, for Garnett, the Rockets were able to walk away with a win in that contest, and Howard made sure to say that during his post-game interview. Unfortunately for Garnett, he was suspended for the next game over his ridiculous headbutt during the scuffle. Howard didn't escape the altercation though either, and was fined $15,000 and got a technical foul. After the game, the Nets head coach Lionel Hollins said that he believed Howard swung at the throat of Garnett, which is why the situation escalated so much. He voiced his opinion that Howard should have been ejected from the contest as well, and in my opinion, I think he's right. Kevin opted not to spend time with the media after the game, but Mason Plumlee did step up and say that Garnett did a lot for the team and was able to contribute, though he also mentioned how it sucked to lose the game after all that fighting. Do you love watching NBA players fight? Then check out the video that appears on your screen now to see some more of your favorite players fight while in the NBA.